My aunt tricked me into taking the garage junk. It cost her $1.7 million. I never thought my life would come down to 12 buckets of toxic sludge in a dead man's garage. But there I was, 45 years old, with a back that screamed every time I bent over, staring at what my family considered my inheritance. Let me back up. Uncle Frank died 3 weeks before all this went down. Heart attack. Quick and clean, the way he probably would have wanted it. Frank was my dad's older brother, the one who made it. Not rich, but comfortable. Nice house in the suburbs. The kind with a circular driveway and those fancy iron gates that make you feel like you are entering somewhere important. He never married, never had kids. Just collected stuff. Coins, mostly. Old tools. Random junk that somehow became valuable because it sat in his basement long enough. When I got the call about the will reading, I will not lie, I had hope. Not mansion inheriting hope, but maybe this fixes my mortgage hope. See, I had been drowning for about 6 months at that point. The hospital bills from Sarah's surgery, the overdue mortgage payments, the credit cards I had been juggling like some sad circus act. I needed $5,000. Just $5,000 to stop the bleeding. I drove out there on a Tuesday morning, took the day off work. My supervisor was not thrilled, but I told him it was family business, and he backed off. The drive took 90 minutes through traffic that made me want to scream. My truck's air conditioning was busted, so I showed up sweating through my only decent shirt. The house looked the same as I remember from the handful of times I had visited over the years. Big, intimidating. The lawn was already getting shaggy, and I remember thinking somebody should mow it before the neighbors started complaining. Uncle Frank would have hated that. I parked on the street because the driveway was already packed. Aunt Brenda's Mercedes. Cousin Rick's BMW. Even my other cousin Jessica's Lexus. The whole Vulture convention was already there, circling the estate. Brenda met me at the door. 60-something, with that haircut that looks expensive but somehow makes every woman look exactly the same. She had been referring to Frank's place as our estate in her texts, even though her husband died 10 years ago and she never actually lived here. You know the one. She was wearing all black, but it was the kind of black that probably cost more than my mortgage payment. She gave me this tight smile and told me to come in, that the lawyer was about to start. I followed her through the foyer, past all of Frank's weird nautical decorations and the grandfather clock that probably cost more than my truck, into the living room where everyone was gathered. Rick was sprawled on the leather couch like he already owned the place. Mid-30s real estate agent. The kind of guy who wears expensive watches and talks about his portfolio. He barely looked up when I walked in, just gave me this little chin nod like I was a help showing up late. The lawyer, some tired-looking guy named Patterson, had all these folders spread out on the coffee table. He started reading the will, and I tried to pay attention, but it was all that legal language that makes your brain turn to mush. The important parts came quick, though. The house went to Brenda. Made sense, I guess. She had been the one checking on Frank, bringing him groceries when he got too stubborn to drive. The bank accounts, the stocks, all the actual money, that went to Brenda too. Split with Rick and Jessica for some of it. But Brenda was the executor, the one holding all the cards. Rick got the vintage Ford F-150 that Frank had been restoring for 20 years. Beautiful truck. Cherry red, barely driven. Rick did not even wait for the lawyer to finish that paragraph before he announced he was taking it that day, that it would fit perfectly in his collection. Jessica got the antique furniture, the china, all the stuff that looks pretty in a dining room that nobody actually uses. And me? The lawyer shuffled through his papers, looking uncomfortable. He told me Frank had left me something, too. Something in the garage. My heart jumped for a second. Frank's garage. I remembered tools in there, good ones, maybe some collectibles. Maybe this was where the real value was hiding. Brenda stood up right then, smoothing her expensive black dress. She said we should go look, that it would be easier to show me than explain. I followed her and Rick through the kitchen, past the stainless steel everything, out the back door. The garage was attached, one of those two-car jobs with windows up top and the musty smell of motor oil that never quite leaves. Rick hit the lights, and I saw it. 12 buckets. Not nice buckets. Not clean buckets. These were old paint cans and smaller motor oil containers, the gallon and 2-gallon kind with the metal handles, lined up against the back wall like some kind of toxic art installation. Valvoline logos. Sherwin-Williams labels faded to nothing. They were filthy, crusted with decades of garage grime, sticky with something dark that I did not want to identify. Brenda folded her arms and told me that was it. That was my inheritance. Those buckets. Full of coins, she said, like it was supposed to be some kind of consolation prize. Old pennies, nickels, whatever Frank had been tossing in there for 40 years. Mixed with trash. Cigarette butts. Rusty bolts. Washers. Shop debris. All of it oxidized and corroded and cemented together with old paint and oil residue. I just stood there. The smell hit me, that sour, chemical stench of old motor oil gone rancid mixed with whatever paint had been soaking into everything for decades. It made my eyes water. Rick laughed, not a polite chuckle. A real laugh, the kind that makes it clear he thinks you are the punchline. He told me I might get $300 if I sorted through all of it, maybe enough for a few pizzas. He was holding a Starbucks cup, some iced coffee situation, and he took this long sip while staring at those buckets like they were the funniest thing he had ever seen. I asked if there was anything else. Tools, maybe. Frank had good tools. Brenda shook her head. The tools went with the house. Everything went with the house. She gestured to buckets. This was what Frank specifically designated for me. Contents of the garage. She made it sound like he had done me a favor. Then she hit me with the real kicker. She told me she was not paying for hazardous waste disposal. The paint cans, the oil containers, all of it was technically toxic. The disposal company had quoted her $800 to haul it all away properly. $800 she was not willing to spend. So here was my choice. I could take the buckets right now, haul away all of Frank's garage garbage, and we would be square. Or I could refuse, and I would not get a single thing. Not even one of Frank's old screwdrivers. Take it or leave it, right now. I looked at those buckets. 12 of them. Even from 6 feet away. I could see the crud build up on the handles, the way the metal had corroded, the dark stains running down the sides. My back was already aching from the drive. I thought about trying to lift even one of those things. But I also thought about my mortgage, about the credit card bills stacked on my kitchen counter, about Sarah working double shifts at the hospital, coming home so tired she could barely stand, all because I could not keep our finances above water. $300. Maybe, if I was lucky, if I spent hours sorting through toxic sludge. It was insulting. It was humiliating. But it was $300 more than I had. Brenda pulled out a paper then. She had it ready, folded in her expensive handbag, a legal document. She unfolded it on top of one of the cleaner buckets and pulled out a pen. She told me it was just a formality, a release of interest, basically a paper saying I accepted my share of the estate and would not come back later asking for more. Standard stuff. She pointed to the signature line, that little X marked in blue ink. I am not a lawyer, but I am not stupid either. I read it, not the whole thing. There were like 3 pages of legal nonsense, but I read the important part, the part that described what I was receiving. It said I was taking possession of the contents of the garage, specifically described as scrap metal, debris, and containers requiring hazardous waste disposal, including but not limited to paint buckets and oil containers. The document even had the words in bold, hazardous waste disposal, like they wanted to make absolutely sure everyone understood these were not treasures, not valuables, not anything worth keeping. These were trash, toxic trash, trash that would cost money to throw away properly. I hesitated. Something about it felt off, felt too convenient. But what choice did I have? If I walked away, I got nothing. At least this was something. Maybe there really were a few $100s in coins buried in that mess. Maybe it would help. I signed. Brenda took the paper back, folded it carefully, tucked it away. She told me I should probably get started loading up, that she wanted the garage cleared out by the end of the day. She had a cleaning crew coming tomorrow, and they needed the space empty. Rick was already heading back to the house. He called over his shoulder that I should probably back my truck up to the garage door, make it easier on myself. Helpful guy. I did what he said, pulled my beat-up Toyota around to the garage, dropped the tailgate. The metal scraped loud in the quiet suburban afternoon. Somewhere a dog was barking. Somebody was mowing a lawn 3 houses down. Normal sounds. Normal day. I grabbed the first bucket. The handle was sticky. Not just dirty, but genuinely sticky, like someone had spilled syrup on it and let it sit for 20 years. The thing was not even full. Maybe half filled with coins and debris. The rest just empty space and dried paint residue clinging to the sides. But the weight still hit me hard. 40 pounds, maybe 50. The coins inside shifted with this heavy, grinding sound, metal on metal. I got about waist high, and my lower back made this popping sound that I felt all the way up my spine. I nearly dropped it. Instead, I sort of shuffled it forward, set on the tailgate, then shoved it into the truck bed. It landed with this deep, hollow boom that echoed off the garage walls. 11 more to go. By the 3rd bucket, I was sweating through my shirt. By the 5th, my hands were covered in black grime that would not wipe off, some combination of motor oil and ancient paint that seemed to bind the skin at the molecular level. My back was screaming. That old injury from a construction job 10 years ago, the one that never quite healed right, was making itself known with every lift. Rick came back out somewhere around bucket 7. He stood in the garage doorway, still holding that iced coffee, watching me struggle. He asked if I needed help, but in that tone of voice that makes it clear he was not actually offering. More like he was commenting on my incompetence. I told him I was fine. I was not fine. Bucket 7 felt like it weighed 100 pounds. I got into the truck, and my vision went spotty for a second. Rick laughed again. He told me I was getting a good workout, at least, that I should look on the bright side. All this effort might net me enough for a set of used tires. Maybe some groceries, if I was lucky. Then he headed back inside, and I heard the door lock behind him. That is, when it hit me, really hit me. They were not just dividing up the estate. They were not just cutting me out of the real money. They were making me haul their trash for them, making me pay for the disposal with my labor while they got the house, the bank accounts, the vehicles, everything that actually mattered, and I had signed a paper saying I was okay with it, that I accepted this, that I would not complain. I wanted to drop the buckets right there. I wanted to walk away, get in my truck, and never look back. But I thought about Sarah, about the mortgage, about that number on the bank statement that kept getting smaller every month while the bills kept getting bigger. $300. Maybe. It was degrading, but degradation does not show up on credit reports. I loaded bucket 8, then 9. My hands were shaking, not from the weight anymore, but from something else. Anger, maybe, or shame. Hard to tell the difference when they are both choking you. 10, 11, 12. The last bucket was somehow the worst. Lighter, maybe, but it sloshed when I picked it up. Something liquid still in there after all these years. It left a dark stain on my shirt when I pressed it against my chest carrier. I did not want to know what it was. I just wanted to be done. I dropped the tailgate closed. The sound echoed too loud in the quiet afternoon. My truck was sagging on its suspension, weighed down with decades of someone else's garage debris. The whole bed was covered in dark stains now, patterns of oil and paint and rust that would probably never come out. Brenda came out to inspect my work. She actually walked around the garage with her phone flashlight on, checking the corners, making sure I had not missed anything. She found an old shop rag in the corner and told me to take that too. Could not leave anything behind. The cleaning crew needed it spotless. I took the rag, added it to the pile. She seemed satisfied. She told me it was good to see family taking care of family. That Frank would have appreciated me helping out like this. That some people would have just refused and caused problems. But I was being reasonable. Reasonable. That was the word she used. Rick walked me out to the driveway. His BMW was blocking part of my path, and I had to wait while he moved it. He made a big show of adjusting his mirrors, taking his time. When he finally pulled forward, he rolled down his window. He told me I should check the buckets soon, before the coins corroded any further. Time was not on my side with that stuff. He grinned, waved, and drove off. I stood there next to my truck, hands black with grime, back on fire, clothes ruined. The circular driveway suddenly felt like a cage. The fancy iron gates felt like they were mocking me. Everything about that house, that family, that whole situation felt designed to remind me that I was not quite good enough to be part of the real inheritance. I got in my truck, started the engine. The whole vehicle felt wrong, weighted down and sluggish. The suspension creaked every time I hit a bump. The smell from the buckets was already seeping to the closed bed cover, that sour chemical stench filling the cab. I drove through those iron gates and did not look back. My hands left dark prints on the steering wheel. The drive home took forever. Traffic was worse somehow, or maybe it just felt worse because I had nothing to show for my day except toxic waste and a back injury. I kept thinking about that document Brenda had made me sign. Hazardous waste disposal. That phrase kept circling my brain like a vulture. I had driven 90 minutes to a dead man's house. I had been humiliated by my own family. I had been forced to choose between garbage and nothing. I had loaded 12 buckets of chemical sludge into my truck with my own failing back, and I had signed a legal document accepting all of it. I had, essentially, agreed to be the family's trash service, and I had probably thrown my back out doing it. Sarah was going to kill me. We needed that $5,000. We needed it desperately. Instead, I was bringing home buckets of corroded pennies that might add up to enough for a tank of gas and some groceries. The sun was setting by the time I pulled into our driveway. The house looked small and tired, the way houses do when you're behind on the mortgage. Paint peeling, gutters sagging, the grass too long because I had not had time to mow it in 3 weeks. I turned off the engine and just sat there for a minute. My back was throbbing. My hands were destroyed. My shirt was ruined. And in the back of my truck sat 12 buckets of what my family considered my fair share. I had never felt like more of a failure in my entire life. Through the kitchen window, I could see Sarah moving around. She was still in her scrubs from the hospital. Probably just got home herself. The light was warm and yellow, and for a second I did not want to go in, did not want to face her, did not want to explain what I was bringing home. But the buckets were not going anywhere. And neither was I. I grabbed the door handle, took a breath, and headed inside. The door squeaked when I pushed it open. Sarah was at the kitchen sink, still in her navy blue scrubs, washing something. She turned when she heard me, and I watched her face do that thing it does when she is trying to figure out how bad the news is going to be before I even say anything. I must have looked like hell. My shirt was stained black and brown, my hands were covered in grime, and I was walking like an old man because my back had locked up somewhere around bucket 9. She asked how it went, just those 3 words, but I could hear everything else underneath them. Please tell me we got something. Please tell me this fixes things. Please tell me you did not drive 2 hours for nothing. I told her I got my inheritance. Then I gestured toward the driveway, toward my truck sitting out there with its suspension sagging. She dried her hands on a towel and followed me outside. I dropped the tailgate, and the smell hit us both, that chemical cocktail of old motor oil and paint thinner and rust. The buckets looked even worse in the fading light, all sticky and crusted and pathetic. Sarah just stared. She did not say anything for a long time. Then she asked what was in them. Coins, I told her. Pennies mostly. Maybe some nickels. Mixed with about 40 years of garage trash. She asked how much I thought it was worth. Her voice was flat, the way it gets when she is trying really hard not to cry or scream, or both. I shrugged. Maybe $300. Maybe less. I would have to sort through it all. Clean it. Count it. The Coinstar machine at the grocery store would not even take them in this condition. She turned and walked back into the house without another word. I heard the screen door slam. I stood there in the driveway for a minute, looking at those buckets. Part of me wanted to leave them in the truck forever, just drive around with them until the suspension finally gave out. But that was not going to pay the electric bill. I grabbed the first bucket and carried it inside, then another. then another. By the time I got them all into the kitchen, Sarah had pulled out a piece of mail from the stack on the counter. The electric bill, $250, and it was overdue. She set it on the table without looking at me. Then she said I should just take the coins to Coinstar tomorrow, that we needed cash now, that we could not afford to wait while I played around sorting pennies. I told her the machine would jam. These coins were not just dirty, they were cemented together with crud. They would destroy the counting mechanism. I had to wash them first, at least get the worst of the sludge off. She asked how long that would take. I did not have an answer. She left the kitchen. I heard our bedroom door close, not quite a slam, but close enough. I looked at the buckets lined up on our kitchen floor. 12 containers of failure. I could smell them from 6 feet away, that rancid oil smell mixing with whatever Sarah had been cooking earlier. The whole house was going to reek by morning. But she was right about one thing. We needed money. Fast. So I might as well get started. I grabbed the least disgusting bucket and dumped it into our biggest mixing bowl. Coins cascaded out, along with metal shavings, cigarette butts, chunks of dry paint, and things I could not identify. The sound was actually satisfying, that heavy clink of metal on metal. It almost made me feel like I was doing something productive. I filled the sink with hot water and added dish soap. Sarah had this industrial hand cleaner called Fast Orange that she used when the hospital supply room got particularly gross. I squeezed a generous amount into the water and started dropping coins in by the handful. The water turned black immediately, not even brown. Black, like I was washing parts from an oil change. I let them soak for 10 minutes, then started scrubbing with an old toothbrush. Most of the crud came off, but the coins still looked terrible. Oxidized, corroded. Lots of them were barely recognizable, but at least they were no longer sticky. I laid them out on a towel to dry. That is when I noticed it. One coin looked different, not copper-colored like the others. This one was silver, or steel, or something else. I picked it up and held it under the kitchen light. The date said 1943. I am not a coin collector. Never have been, but something about that date tickled something in my memory. I had heard something once, maybe on TV or in a history class 1,000 years ago, about pennies during World War II. I grabbed my phone and pulled up the refrigerator magnet we use for grocery lists. Just a cheap promotional magnet from the pizza place down the street. I touched it to the coin. Click. The coin jumped toward the magnet and stuck. Okay, so it was magnetic. That meant it was steel, not copper. They made steel pennies during the war because copper was needed for ammunition. I remembered that now. My brain was starting to wake up despite the exhaustion. I opened Google and typed in 1943 steel penny value. The results loaded. I scrolled through a couple of coin dealer websites. They all said basically the same thing. Steel pennies from 1943 were common. Most were worth 10 to 15 cents in circulated condition. Maybe $1 if they were in perfect shape. 15 cents. Great. I had spent 45 minutes washing coins to find a 15-cent piece. But then I saw it. That little section Google does sometimes where it says, people also ask. One of the questions caught my eye. How much is a 1943 copper penny worth? I stared at that question. Copper, not steel. I clicked on it. The answer loaded, and my stomach did something weird. The text said that genuine 1943 copper pennies were extremely rare minting errors. Only a handful existed. They were worth over $1 million. Some had sold for more. The key identifier was simple. A real copper penny from 1943 would not be magnetic. I read it again. Then I read it a third time. My hands started shaking. $1 million. For a penny. A penny that did not stick to a magnet. I looked down at the pile of wet coins drying on my kitchen counter. There had to be, 3,000 pennies in that first bucket alone? And I had 11 more buckets in the truck. If Uncle Frank had been dumping coins in these things for 40 years, there could be tens of thousands of pennies in there. And if even one of them was copper instead of steel, I dumped the rest of the first bucket into the sink. I washed faster this time, scrubbing each coin just enough to see the date. I was looking for more 1943s. I found two in the first bucket, both steel, both magnetic. I moved to the second bucket. Nothing. Third bucket. I found three more 1943 pennies, all steel. My back was screaming at me to stop, but I could not. Not now. Not with that number burned into my brain. $1 million. By midnight, I had gone through 6 buckets. My fingers were raw. The fast orange had stripped away the top layer of my skin, and I had Band-Aids on 3 fingers where the coins had cut me. The kitchen table was covered with piles of sorted pennies, all organized by date. I had found 18 1943 pennies total. Every single one was steel. Every single one stuck to the magnet. I was starting to think this whole thing was a waste of time. Maybe there were no copper 1943 pennies. Maybe that article was talking about some impossible rarity that would never show up in a random bucket of garage coins. Sarah came out around 1 in the morning. She stood in the doorway in her pajamas, looking at the disaster I had made of our kitchen. Coins everywhere. Buckets stacked in the corner. The smell of fast orange and motor oil filling the air. She asked what I was doing. I told her I was checking for something. She asked what. I did not want to say it out loud because it sounded insane, but I told her anyway. I was looking for a coin that might be worth a lot of money. She asked how much. I said maybe $1 million. The look she gave me, I will never forget it. It was not anger. It was worse. It was disappointment mixed with pity, like she had just watched me lose my mind in real time. She told me to come to bed. We would deal with this tomorrow. I needed sleep. I told her I just needed to finish checking the 1943s. It would not take long. She shook her head and went back to the bedroom. I heard the door close again, softer this time. Resigned. I kept working. Bucket 7. Bucket 8. My eyes were burning from exhaustion. The kitchen light was too bright, making everything look washed out and surreal. I felt like I was in a dream or maybe a nightmare. My hands moved automatically now. Grab coin, scrub coin, check date, test magnet. Click, click, click. Every 1943 penny I found stuck to that stupid pizza magnet. By 3 in the morning, I had gone through 11 buckets. I had found 28 1943 pennies. All steel, all worthless. I sat there looking at the last bucket. It was smaller than the others, an old Valvoline oil can that had been cut open at the top. It was only half full, mostly just sludge at the bottom. Part of me wanted to quit, to admit that this had been a wild goose chase, to accept that my inheritance was exactly what it looked like, $300 worth of corroded pennies and a lifetime supply of garage smell. But I had come this far. Might as well finish. I dumped the last bucket into the sink. The coins were worse than the others, covered in this black tar-like substance that must have been paint mixed with oil that had hardened over decades. I had to use a butter knife to scrape some of them apart. I washed them. I scrubbed them. I laid them out. Most were so corroded I could barely read the dates. But there, near the bottom of the pile, I saw it. A penny, darker than the others. Dull, tarnished, but the color was wrong. It was not the silver gray of steel. It was brown, copper brown. I picked it up. My hand was shaking so bad, I almost dropped it. I held it under the light, squinted at the date. The numbers were barely visible under the corrosion. 1-9-4-3. I could hear my heartbeat, literally hear it, pounding in my ears. My mouth was dry. I felt dizzy. I grabbed the magnet, brought it close to the coin, stopped. What if I was wrong? What if this was just another steel penny with weird discoloration? What if the magnet clicked and all of this had been for nothing? I took a breath, brought the magnet closer. Nothing happened. The coin just sat there on my palm. The magnet hung in the air half an inch away. No pull, no attraction, nothing. I moved the magnet around the coin, touched it to the edge, touched it to the face, touched it to the back. Nothing. The coin did not move. I set the magnet down, picked up a steel 1943 penny, brought the magnet close. Click, It jumped right to the magnet. I tried the brown penny again. Nothing. No magnetic response at all. My brain was trying to process this, but could not. This could not be real. This could not actually be happening. People do not find $1,000,000 coins in toxic waste buckets. That is not how the world works. That is not how my life works. I tested it again, and again, and again. I must have tested that coin 20 times, convinced that the magnet was broken or that I was hallucinating from exhaustion. But every time, the result was the same. The steel penny stuck. The brown penny did not. I Googled the article again. Read it carefully. It said copper pennies were not magnetic. It said steel pennies were. It said the only way to be certain was to test the weight. Copper pennies weighed 3.11 grams. Steel pennies weighed 2.7 grams. I did not have a scale that precise. Sarah had a kitchen scale for her meal prep, but it only measured in ounces. I needed something more accurate. Then I remembered. Sarah had bought a new food scale last year for her keto diet phase, one of those digital ones that measured in grams. She complained that it was too sensitive, that it registered the weight of her finger if she touched the plate. I walked to the bedroom door, pressed my ear against it. I could hear her breathing, slow and regular. She was asleep. I opened the door as quietly as I could. The hinges creaked anyway. Sarah stirred but did not wake. I could see her face in the dim light from the hallway, peaceful, exhausted from another 12-hour shift saving lives while I played with pennies in the kitchen. I felt like a lunatic. I felt like I was losing my mind. But I could not stop now. I tiptoed to her side of the bed. She kept the scale in her nightstand because she used away protein powder for her breakfast shakes. I slid the drawer open. It squeaked. Sarah's breathing changed. I froze. She rolled over, mumbled something. I stayed perfectly still, barely breathing. After about 30 seconds, her breathing evened out again. I grabbed the scale, closed the drawer, started backing out of the room, and stepped on the one floorboard that always creaks. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet house. Sarah's eyes opened. She sat up, groggy and confused. She asked what I was doing. I stood there like a burglar caught mid-heist, holding her kitchen scale at 4 a.m, covered in coin grime and motor oil, probably smelling like a mechanic's nightmare. I told her not to ask any questions. I told her I just needed to weigh something. I told her I thought I might have found it. She asked what I found. Her voice was thick with sleep and confusion. I could not make myself say it out loud. Could not make myself risk sounding that crazy. So I just said I needed the scale, that I would explain in a minute, that she should trust me. She stared at me for a long moment. Then she laid back down, pulled the blanket over her head, and told me to let her know if I was going to hospital or jail. I took the scale back to the kitchen, set it on the table, turned it on. The display glowed blue in the dark kitchen. It read 0.00 grams. I placed the brown penny on the scale, held my breath, watched the numbers flicker. The display settled. 3.11 grams. I took the penny off, put it back on. 3.11 grams. I tried a steel penny. 2.7 grams. Back to the brown penny. 3.11 grams. I set the scale down, sat down in the kitchen chair, looked at that small, dirty, brown coin sitting on my kitchen table under the harsh fluorescent light. 3.11 grams. Not magnetic. Dated in 1943. Copper-colored under the tarnish. Either I had just found $1,000,000 penny in a bucket of toxic waste, or I was having a complete mental breakdown in my kitchen at 4 a.m. Maybe both. I picked up the coin, held it up to the light. It looked so ordinary, so small, so impossible. How does something like this even happen? How does a coin worth more than my house, more than everything I own combined, end up in a paint bucket in a dead man's garage? The whole situation felt surreal, felt wrong, like the universe had glitched and accidentally dropped a cheat code into my life. I wanted to wake Sarah up, wanted to show her, wanted to hear her tell me I was not crazy, that the numbers were real, that this was actually happening. But another part of me was terrified that I was wrong, that there was some other explanation, that I would get her hopes up just to crush them again when this turned out to be nothing. I looked at the clock. For 17 in the morning, in a few hours, the sun would come up. Sarah would have to go to work. I would have to figure out what to do next. But right now, in this moment, sitting in my kitchen covered in grime and holding a penny that might or might not be worth a fortune, I allowed myself to feel something I had not felt in a long time. Hope. Dangerous. Stupid. Probably going to destroy me hope. But hope nonetheless. I wrapped the penny in a clean paper towel, put it in a small plastic bag, set it on the counter where I could not lose it. Then I walked back to the bedroom. Sarah was awake again. She had turned on her bedside lamp. She asked if I was okay. I told her I needed her kitchen scale, that I had weighed something, that the numbers looked right, but I needed her to check them, that I might be losing my mind, but I needed her to tell me what she saw. She looked at me like I had grown a second head, but she got up, followed me back to the kitchen in her pajamas and bare feet, looked at the disaster coins and buckets and grime covering every surface. I handed her the penny, told her to weigh it, told her to tell me what the scale said. She placed it on the scale, weighted, read the display, 3.11 grams. She looked up at me, asked what that meant. I pulled up the article on my phone, showed her the part about the weight, about the magnet test, about the value, watched her face as she read it, watched the confusion turn to disbelief, turn to something else, something like shock. She asked if I was saying this penny was worth $1 million. Her voice cracked on the number. I told her maybe. Probably not, but maybe. I told her I needed to get it authenticated. I told her I needed to find an expert who could tell me if this was real or if I had officially lost my mind. She sat down at the kitchen table, picked up the penny, looked at it, set it down, looked at me. Then she started laughing. Not happy laughing. The kind of laughing people do when they do not know what else to do. The kind that is half crying. She said our life was insane, that we were drowning in bills, that she worked 60-hour weeks to keep us afloat, that I had driven 2 hours to pick up little garbage, and now I was telling her that garbage might contain $1 million penny. She said it was too much, too ridiculous, too impossible, but she picked up the penny again and stared at it like it might explode. Then she asked what we'd do next. I told her I had no idea, but we would figure it out. Together. We always did. The sun was starting to come up outside, through the kitchen window. I could see the sky turning from black to dark blue, to that weird orange-pink that happens right before dawn. The bucket sat in the corner, still half full of unsorted coins. The scale sat on the table, still showing 3.11 grams. And in my hand, wrapped in a paper towel like it was some kind of holy relic, sat a penny that might change everything, or might be nothing. We would find out soon enough. That first night, we barely slept. We just sat at the kitchen table, taking turns holding the penny, testing it with a magnet over and over like the laws of physics might suddenly change. By the time the sun was fully up, we had a plan. Sort of. First thing I did was call in sick to work. My supervisor was annoyed, but I told him it was a family emergency. Technical truth. Sarah had the day off, which felt like some kind of cosmic alignment, because I needed her for this. I needed someone to tell me I was not crazy. We spent the morning on Google. Not just random searches, but deep research. PCGS, Professional Coin Grading Service. They were the gold standard for coin authentication. Their website had detailed instructions for submitting coins. You could not just walk in. You had to mail it to them, to California. The idea of putting $1 million penny in the mail made me want to throw up. But Sarah found the section about registered mail. It was a special USPS service designed for valuable items. The package traveled in locked safes, required signatures at every transfer point, and was insured up to $50,000. Still way less than what the penny might be worth, but it was the best we could do. We spent 2 hours at the computer reading forum posts from other coin collectors who had submitted valuable finds. Everyone said the same thing. Use registered mail. Pack it carefully. Insure it for the maximum. Pray. Around noon, we drove to the post office. Not the little contract station at the pharmacy. The actual post office. The one with the long lines and the fluorescent lights that make everything look like a crime scene. I had packed a penny in a small plastic coin holder I bought at the hobby store that morning. Then I wrapped it in bubble wrap. Then I put it in a small cardboard box. Then I wrapped that in more bubble wrap. The whole package was maybe the size of a deck of cards, but it felt heavier than those buckets of coins. The weight of possibility. The line at the post office was brutal. 12 people deep on a Tuesday afternoon. Everyone looked miserable. A woman in front of us was arguing about postage rates. A guy behind us was sighing every 30 seconds like that would make the line move faster. Sarah held my hand. Neither of us talked. What was there to say? We were about to put our entire future in a cardboard box and trust the Postal Service with it. When we finally got to the counter, the clerk looked bored. Name tag, said Patricia. She asked how she could help in that flat tone that said she had already helped 500 people today and did not want to help one more. I told her I needed to send something registered mail. She perked up a little. Not many people use registered mail. It is expensive and complicated, which means paperwork, which apparently made her day more interesting. She pulled out forms, asked what was in the package. I hesitated. Sarah squeezed my hand. I told Patricia it was a collectible coin. She asked the value. I said it might be worth a lot. She asked how much for insurance. I said the maximum, $50,000. Patricia stopped typing, looked at me, really looked at me for the first time. She asked if I was serious. I told her I was dead serious. She said that would be expensive, over $100 in postage and insurance fees. I pulled out my credit card, the one that was almost maxed out. I told her to charge it. She printed the paperwork, had me fill out forms, require my ID, made me sign 3 different places. Then she pulled out this roll of brown paper tape and a date stamp. She explained the procedure like she was teaching a class. The brown paper tape was special. It was designed to show tampering. She would seal all the edges of my box with it. Then she would stamp the date across every seam. If anyone tried to open the box, the tape would tear or the stamps would not line up. It was a security measure. I watched her work. She was meticulous, sealed every edge, stamped every intersection. Bam, bam, bam. The sound of that stamp echoed in the post office. Each hit felt like a heartbeat. This was really happening. I was really mailing a potentially $1 million penny to California in a box sealed with tape and hope. Patricia handed me the receipt, told me to keep it somewhere safe. It had the tracking number and all the documentation. She said the package would arrive in 5 to 7 business days. Then she told me something that made my stomach drop. She said once it left her hands, it was out of her control. The package would be locked in a safe, transferred from facility to facility under armed supervision. But accidents happen. Things get lost. Insurance would cover up to $50,000. But I needed to understand the risk. I understood. I took the receipt. Sarah and I walked out of the post office in a daze. We sat in the truck for 10 minutes without starting the engine. Just sat there. The receipt was in my hand. The tracking number stared up at me. Somewhere in the back of that building, my penny was being loaded into a safe, starting its journey across the country. I felt like I had just pushed my kid onto a bus for the first time. That same combination of pride and terror and absolute loss of control. Sarah asked what we do now. I told her we wait. She asked what if they say it is fake. I told her then at least we would know. She asked what if they say it is real. I did not have an answer for that. We drove home. The house felt empty without those buckets. I had hauled the rest of them to the recycling center that morning. 12 buckets of coins that I had washed, sorted, and counted. Total value, $342. I had deposited it into our account. It covered the electric bill with a few bucks left over. The next 5 days were torture. I checked the tracking number every hour. Watched that little package icon move across the digital map of America. From our city to the regional hub. From the hub to the airport. From the airport to California. Each scan was a small relief. Still in transit. Still safe. Still moving. Sarah went back to work. I went back to work. We did not talk about it. What was there to say? Either the penny was real or it was not. Either our lives were about to change or they were not. Talking about it would not make the package move faster. Day 6. No update. Day 7. Still no update. Day 8. I started to panic. The tracking just said, in transit to destination. Nothing else. No scans. No confirmations. I called the post office. They told me registered mail sometimes does not scan at every checkpoint for security reasons. They told me not to worry. I worried anyway. Day 9. Saturday morning. I was drinking coffee, staring at the tracking page for the 1,000th time, when my phone rang. Unknown number. California area code. I answered. A woman's voice. Professional. Friendly. She asked if I was Mark. I confirmed. She said she was calling from PCGS. They had received my submission. My heart stopped. Just completely stopped for a second. Sarah was across the kitchen. She saw my face and froze. The woman asked if I was sitting down. I was not. I sat. She told me they had examined the coin. She said her supervisor wanted to speak with me directly. There was a pause. Then a man's voice came on the line. He introduced himself. Said he had been grading coins for 30 years. Said he had seen maybe a dozen genuine 1943 copper cents in his entire career. Said most submissions turn out to be altered steel cents or foreign coins, or just wishful thinking. Another pause. I could not breathe. Then he told me congratulations. My coin was genuine. A legitimate 1943 bronze cent. An error from the San Francisco Mint. He said they were grading it 55 Australian dollars. Almost uncirculated. He said it would be encapsulated in one of their holders with a certification label. He said it would be returned to me via insured registered mail. I did not hear the rest of what he said. My ears were ringing. Sarah was standing in front of me asking what happened. What did they say? And I could not form words. I just held up the phone and hit speaker so she could hear. The grader was now talking about options. He said most people with coins of this value prefer to sell through auction. He said PCGS worked with several major auction houses. He mentioned Heritage Auctions specifically. They specialize in rare coins. He could facilitate an introduction if I was interested. I asked how much he thought it might sell for. He laughed. Not a mean laugh. A laugh that said I had no idea what I was dealing with. He told me the last 1943 copper cent that sold at Heritage went for over $1.5 million. He said mine had excellent color and detail despite the environmental damage. He said it could fetch somewhere between $1 and $2 million. Maybe more if the right collectors were bidding. Sarah sat down on the kitchen floor. Just sat down right there on the linoleum like her legs had stopped working. I thanked the grader. He said someone from Heritage would contact me within 48 hours. I hung up. We sat there. Sarah on the floor. Me in the chair. Neither of us moving. The house was so quiet I could hear the refrigerator humming. Outside, someone was mowing their lawn. Normal sounds. Normal world. Nothing felt normal. Sarah started laughing. Then crying. Then laughing again. I just stared at my hands. The same hands that had scrubbed that penny. The same hands that had loaded those buckets. The same hands that had signed Brenda's document, calling it all hazardous waste. 2 days later, Heritage Auctions called. A consultant named Jennifer. She was smooth. Professional. She explained the process. They would include the coin in their next major auction. The September sale. Prime timing. Maximum bidder participation. She said based on recent comparables, they would set a reserve of $200,000 and expect strong bidding well above $1 million. She emailed me a contract. Sarah and I read it 3 times. It was standard consignment terms. They would photograph the coin, market it, handle the auction, take a percentage. The whole thing felt surreal, like signing a record deal or a movie contract. Things that happen to other people. I signed, scanned it, emailed it back. Jennifer confirmed receipt. She said the auction would be in Dallas, 6 weeks away. She said I was welcome to attend in person or watch online. She strongly recommended attending. These were special moments, she said, once in a lifetime. The next 6 weeks were bizarre. We could not tell anyone. Jennifer had advised us to keep it quiet until after the sale. Too many scammers. Too many relatives with lawyers. Just wait until the money cleared, she said. Then we could tell whoever we wanted. So we went to work, paid our bills, acted normal. But everything felt different. Like we were living in two worlds at once. The world where we were broke and stressed and drowning, and the world where we were about to become millionaires. The worlds had not collided yet, but they would. Sarah and I debated whether to fly to Dallas. The auction was on a Thursday. We would need hotel rooms, time off work. Flights were expensive, but Jennifer had said it was a special moment. And how could we not be there? How could we watch this happen on a computer screen? We booked the cheapest flights we could find. Found a motel 3 miles from the auction house. Nothing fancy. We could not afford fancy. Not yet. The flight to Dallas was bumpy. Sarah hated flying. She gripped my hand the whole way. When we landed, we took an Uber to the motel. It was the kind of place with exterior doors and a neon sign, but it was clean and cheap and close. That was enough. The auction was the next afternoon. We got there 2 hours early. The building was intimidating. Glass and steel. Modern. The lobby had display cases with rare coins under lights. Some of them had price tags that made me dizzy. $300,000 for a nickel. $500,000 for a silver dollar. Jennifer met us in the lobby. She was younger than I expected. Mid-30s. Designer suit. She shook our hands and led us upstairs to the auction room. The room was smaller than I imagined. Maybe 100 seats. About half were filled. Jennifer explained that most bidders participated by phone or online. The people in the room were mostly dealers and serious collectors. The real money was on the phones. She showed us the seats near the middle. Told us our lot was number 405, probably about 90 minutes into the sale. She wished us luck and went to take her position near the phones. The auction started. The auctioneer was fast. Rapid fire. I could barely understand him. Lot numbers flew by. Prices climbed. A coin would start at $10,000 and sell for $50 in 30 seconds. It was dizzying. Sarah held my hand. We watched the lots tick by. 380, 390, 400. My heart was pounding so hard I thought people could hear it. Then the screen changed. Lot 405. There it was. My penny. Huge on the projection screen. The little copper coin that had been sitting in a paint bucket for 40 years. Now photographed in high definition. Graded. Certified. Worth more than my house. The auctioneer announced it. 1943 San Francisco bronze sent PCGS 55 Australian dollars. One of fewer than 20 known examples. Opening bid $200,000. A paddle went up immediately. Then another. The price jumped. 250, 300, 400. Phones were ringing. Jennifer was taking bids. Other staff were taking bids. The auctioneer's voice was a constant stream. Numbers climbing. 500,000, 600, 700, 800. Sarah was squeezing my hand, so hard I lost feeling in my fingers. I could not breathe, could not think. Just watch the numbers climb. 900,000, 1 million, 1.1, 1.2. The room got quiet except for the auctioneer. Most of the paddle bidders had dropped out. It was down to phones now. 2 bidders, going back and forth. 1.3, 1.4, 1.5. The auctioneer called for 1.6. Pause. One of the phone bidders nodded. 1.6. The other phone hesitated. The auctioneer called it again. 1.6. Going once. Going twice. The second phone jumped in. 1.7. The first phone went silent. The auctioneer called it. 1.7 million. Going once. Going twice. He raised his gavel. The crack of wood on wood echoed through the room. Sold. $1,700,000. The room applauded. Sarah buried her face in my shoulder. I felt tears on my face, but I was not sad. I was not happy either. I was just overwhelmed. Completely and utterly overwhelmed. Jennifer came over, congratulated us, explained that after the auction house fees, we would net approximately $1.4 million. The funds would transfer to our account within 10 business days. She handed me paperwork. I signed without reading it. My hands were shaking too badly to hold the pen steady. We left the auction house in a daze. Walked 3 blocks before we realized we were walking the wrong direction. Had to turn around. Found a liquor store. Bought a cheap bottle of champagne and 2 plastic cups. Went back to our motel room. The room was exactly as we left it. Unmade bed. Our suitcases on the floor. The ice machine humming in the hallway. We sat on the edge of the bed and opened the champagne. It fizzed over the top because I opened it wrong. We did not care. Poured it into the plastic cups and drank. Sarah asked if this was real. I told her I did not know. It felt like a dream. Like any second we would wake up back in our kitchen with buckets of worthless pennies. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost did not answer, but I did. A man's voice. Professional. He introduced himself as an attorney from some law firm in my home state. He said he was calling on behalf of my Aunt Brenda and cousin Rick. He said they had filed an injunction against the auction proceeds. He said the coin belonged to Frank's estate, and I had obtained it fraudulently. He said they were prepared to sue unless we reached an agreement. The champagne turned to acid in my stomach. Sarah saw my face change. Asked what was wrong. I put the phone on speaker. The lawyer was still talking, saying things about estate law and inheritance disputes and burden of proof, saying that Brenda was willing to settle, that she understood I had put in work, that she would offer me 10% of the proceeds as compensation for my time and effort. The rest would return to the estate to be divided properly. 10%. $140,000. He made it sound generous. I hung up, did not say a word, just hung up. The phone rang again immediately. I turned it off. Sarah asked what we were going to do. I told her I did not know, but I knew one thing. I was not giving Brenda 1 cent of that money. Not after what she had done. Not after the document she had made me sign. Not after she had called it hazardous waste. We did not sleep that night. We called a lawyer back home the next morning. His name was Bill. He had handled some paperwork for us when we bought our house. He was cheap and local, and those were the only qualifications we cared about. He asked us to explain the situation. We told him everything. The inheritance, the buckets, the document, the penny, the auction, the phone call. There was a long pause. Then he asked if we still had the document Brenda made us sign. I told him yes. It was in a file at home. He told us to get on the next flight back. Bring the document. We had work to do. The flight home felt longer than the flight out. Sarah slept. I could not. I kept replaying everything. The garage. The buckets. Brenda's face when she handed me that document. Her insistence that I sign it. The specific wording about hazardous waste disposal. She had been so careful. So thorough. Making sure it was clear these were not valuables. These were trash. Expensive trash that she did not want to pay to get rid of. And now that trash was worth $1.4 million. We met Bill at his office the next day. Brought the document. He read it. Read it again. Started laughing. He told us this was the most beautiful piece of unintentional evidence he had ever seen. He explained that Brenda had essentially classified the buckets as abandoned waste. By making me sign that I was removing hazardous materials, she had legally transferred them from estate property to refuse. The coin was not an inheritance. It was a found item in disposed garbage. He said Brenda and Rick could sue all they wanted. They would lose, and lose badly. The document was ironclad. She had written it herself. Signed it. Made me sign it. All to save $800 in disposal fees. Bill said he would handle it. He sent a letter to their lawyer. Explained the situation. Attached a copy of the document. Said if they wanted to proceed to court, we would be happy to explain to a judge how Brenda had officially declared the contents hazardous waste and demanded I remove them from her property. Their lawyer called back within 24 hours. Said Brenda wanted to meet. Bill said absolutely not. Any communication would go through him. The lawyer said Brenda was willing to negotiate. Bill said there was nothing to negotiate. The document was clear. The coin was mine. The case was closed. They tried anyway. Filed a lawsuit. Bill filed a motion to dismiss. Attached the document. Attached my testimony. Attached the entire paper trail. 3 weeks later, we got a call. The judge had dismissed the case. Ruled in our favor. Ordered Brenda to pay our legal fees. Bill's invoice came to $12,000. Worth every penny. Literally. The auction proceeds hit our account 2 days later. I was at work when it happened. Got the notification on my phone. Checked my banking app. The number did not look real. $1,402,500. Just sitting there in our checking account, like it belonged there. I called Sarah. She was at the hospital. She checked her app, started crying on the phone. Her supervisor asked if she was okay. She told him she needed to go home. Family emergency. He let her go. We met at the house. Sat at the same kitchen table where this all started. Looked at the number on our phones. It did not get less surreal. Sarah asked what we should do first. I told her we pay off the mortgage. She agreed. We logged into the mortgage website. Paid the entire balance. Click submit. Watched the number drop to 0. The house was ours. Actually ours. Then we paid off the credit cards. All of them. The hospital bills. The car payment. Everything. We watched our debt disappear. It took maybe 20 minutes to eliminate problems that had been crushing us for years. When we were done, we still had over $1 million left. We just stared at it. That amount of money does not feel real when you have spent your entire life worried about every dollar. It feels like a glitch, like the universe made a mistake and deposited someone else's money in your account. But it was ours. Earned by washing coins in the sink at 3 a.m. Earned by refusing to give up when everyone else called it trash. Earned by reading that document carefully even when I was desperate and humiliated. We did not buy a mansion. Did not buy a sports car. We kept the house. Kept the truck. Sarah cut her hours at the hospital. Not all the way. She loved her job, but enough that she was not constantly exhausted. I kept working too. Took some of the money and invested it. Put most of it in boring index funds and bonds. The kind of stuff that does not make you rich quick, but does not make you poor either. We paid off Sarah's mom's house. She had been struggling. We did not tell her where the money came from. Just said we had some savings. She cried on the phone, said she could finally breathe. We donated to the hospital where Sarah worked, to the free clinic downtown, to the food bank. Not huge amounts, but enough to make a difference. Enough to feel right. Life got quiet after that. Boring, even, and it was perfect. I was at the grocery store about 6 months later, just buying milk and bread. Normal stuff. I was waiting in line when I heard a coin hit the floor. Saw it roll under the register. A penny. The person in front of me did not notice. Just kept loading groceries onto the belt. I bent down, picked up the penny, looked at the date. 1987, nothing special. Worth 1 cent. I tapped the person on the shoulder, handed them the penny, told them they dropped it. They thanked me. Seemed confused why I bothered. It was just a penny, after all. I smiled, told them you never know. Sometimes pennies are lucky. They laughed, pocketed the coin, went back to their groceries. I checked out, drove home. Sarah was in the garden. She had started growing vegetables, tomatoes and peppers and herbs, things we did not need to grow, but she enjoyed it, said it made her happy. I told her about the penny at the store. She laughed, asked if I checked to see if it was valuable. I told her no. I knew it was not, but it felt right to give it back anyway. Some things are not about the money. She kissed me, went back to her tomatoes. I went inside, made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I had sorted coin for hours, where I had found the penny that changed everything. Sometimes I think about Uncle Frank, wonder if he knew, if he had any idea what was in those buckets, if he mixed that 1 copper penny in there on purpose, or if it was just chance. Just 1 coin in thousands sitting in a paint bucket for 40 years. I think about Brenda, and Rick sometimes too. Wonder if they regret it, if they wish they had just paid the $800 to properly dispose of the hazardous waste. If they lie awake at night thinking about the money they lost by being too cheap and too greedy. Probably not. People like that do not regret. They just move on to the next scheme, the next inheritance, the next person to manipulate. But it does not matter anymore. They are not part of my life, not part of my story. They are just footnotes, cautionary tale characters. What matters is that Sarah and I made it. We paid off our debts. We kept our house. We did not let the money make us crazy or stupid. We just used it to buy back our peace of mind, our time, our future. And every once in a while, when I see a penny on the ground, I pick it up, check the date, smile, put it in my pocket. Because you never know. Sometimes the smallest things turn out to be worth everything. And sometimes trash is just trash until someone takes the time to clean it up and see what is really there. That is the lesson, I guess. Look closer, work harder, read the fine print, and never, ever let someone convince you that your inheritance is garbage, because they might be wrong, and that mistake might cost them everything.